Hey everyone, hope you're good. Coming at you today from Auckland, New Zealand with what will absolutely be one of the most important sales trainings you've ever done. This training goes far beyond the scope of just sales. It's also about human behavior and psychology. And I guarantee you'll never look at people the same again because once you learn the stuff in depth, you'll be able to read your prospects a hell of a lot better with a very high level of accuracy. And my life changed in 2011 when I was first introduced to this. For those of you that are already familiar with the DISC personality profiling, that's what this video is all about. But I've found in the past when I've tried to teach DISC to my students, a lot of them find it difficult to associate the characteristics with each personality trait. So I've decided to take DISC a step further and actually expand on it a little bit more and assign characters to each characteristic trait. And the feedback that I've gotten from my students is that this clicks a lot faster. This is going to be a very comprehensive introductory training, and we'll be rolling out more videos in the future that will go a lot more in depth on a lot of the topics that we cover today. So make sure that you watch to the end and let's jump in.
Okay, so the best way that I like to explain the four different buying personality styles, and just before we jump into like the details of the characteristic traits of each of the personalities, I just want to tell you which personalities exist and why I put them on a quadrant. Okay, so in the top right-hand side here, we have the commander. In the bottom right, we have the influencer. In the bottom left, we have the nurturer. And then in the top left, we have the strategist. Now, as you can see, again, these four personality types, or four buying archetypes rather, have been put on a quadrant. And what's really important for you to understand is where they are on the quadrant in terms of the placement. That really matters, okay? So we need to have them placed exactly as I have them placed here. And the reason being is at the top of the quadrant here, you can see that we've got the strategist and the commander. These two buying personalities are very logical in the way they think and the way they make decisions as well. And then the nurturer and the influencer are emotional in the way that they make purchase decisions. Okay, so when I come down like this, we can see here that we've got logical at the top and emotional at the bottom. Now, second to that, on the left and the right, that actually represents what we call the temporal focus. And when we're talking about temporal focus, we're talking about how does this buying personality, how does this prospect make decisions with regards to how they look at time. So what I mean is with the commander and with the influencer, they're going to be more future focused. Okay, they focus more on goals and on ambitions and things like what can they actually achieve moving forward. So when you get through the prime framework and you're asking them to envision the positive future, they find those questions very easy to answer because they're very future focused in terms of their temporal focus. Okay, and so on the left hand side here we then have the past focus, right? So that would be for the strategist and the nurturer. And so when you ask these two buying personalities to envision the positive future, they'll actually find that a very hard question to answer because naturally the way they think is typically more past based. Okay, they're focused on past failures, on possibly having worked with agencies and being burned in the past before, a little bit more cynical, particularly with the strategist personality type. So what's also really important for you to know is that typically when you're selling to these personalities, people are not necessarily just going to be one type of personality. Okay, it's going to be very contextual based. And what I mean by that, I'll give myself as a great example of this. So when it comes to sales, when it comes to business and, just general kind of day to day, I'm very much so a commander personality type in terms of my characteristic traits. Okay, I'm pretty fast paced. I'm very direct in the way that I communicate. Back when I was working in 9 to 5, I really didn't care for the people aspect. I wasn't really interested in, making friends and meeting new people, stuff like that. I was literally just there to make money. That's very much so a commander personality style. Okay. So that's my selling personality style. But when it comes to my buying personality style, I'm actually the complete opposite. I become a strategist. So I'm one of the people that take my time, that genuinely need time to think about it straight after I've been pitched, particularly if it's going to be like a multi-$1,000 investment that I need to make. I'm never going to be the kind of person that makes that sort of investment on the spot. And this is why I've also said in previous trainings before, there are some personality types out there that genuinely need time to think about it. Those personality types being the strategist and the nurturer, okay, for different reasons. The strategist just needs to always get stuff right and really is, again, a little bit paranoid about making the wrong move. The nurturer, again, I'm going to get into the details of how the personality types work very shortly, but is somebody that just needs time to sit on it and will get big buyer's remorse if they end up buying straight away, okay? So also, just because we're on the conversation about one call closes, These two personality types here, so the influencer and the commander, these two personality types are fantastic for getting one call closes from. They don't need too much convincing outside of the initial call. As long as they see some sort of value in terms of what the commander sees, or with the influencer, as long as they see some sort of fun that they're going to get from this, and kind of the social aspect, they'll move on stuff straight away. But that's just important context to know as we now progress through how each of these personality types work. So number one, we have the commander. Okay, so when we're talking about the commander, I want you to think about your army general, your CEO, somebody who values big picture thinking. Okay, so again, very results driven, very fast paced and direct in terms of how they communicate. Many times they can come off as a little bit abrasive or rough around the edges just because they're so fast paced, and they're not sort of too concerned around details and like larger sort of intricacies of how the system works. So particularly if you're selling to this sort of personality type, you want to be focused more on ROI and also end outcome. You don't want to focus too much on the nitty gritties of how your system works, or, the details of how you're going to get them to the end result. What we call them here when we're talking about a convincer type, we're talking about an automatic convincer with a what criteria. So automatic convincer means that they can be convinced straight away. Okay, you don't need to do too many follow-ups with them. And again, you can actually sell to them typically on that first call. Sometimes it might take a second call, and very, very rarely will you need the third call. But generally speaking, one or two calls and they'll pretty much be closed straight away. What criteria means that they want to know, what can you do for me? Okay, what kind of results can you get for me? And that's pretty much it, right? So they just need to have, again, just the results, maybe show them a little bit of proof, but you don't need to over explain too much. And also you don't need to show them too much proof either. They're not that sort of personality style that needs it. As long as you can show them what you can do at a very top level, how you can do it and what kind of results they can expect, they'll be very happy with that. So their temporal focus, again, is going to be future orientated. They're always thinking about the next goal and the next milestone. Okay, and again, I'm speaking about this just being the commander personality style when it comes to business. That's very much so myself as well. Every time I've set myself a goal in terms of business and I've achieved the goal, I then am focusing on the next goal, right? I'm not really taking the time to enjoy the fact that I actually achieved my goal. I'm just always thinking about the next thing and growing and expanding and getting bigger. So when we're talking about the energy of a commander, they can be quite intense, serious, and commanding. Sometimes they can also come off a little bit intimidating. So again, if you've ever been in front of like a high-level CEO, they don't smile too much. They can be a little bit scary to be around if you don't know them sort of on a personal level. It's nothing personal to you as to why they're acting like that around you, but that's just how they are. Now, how to work with them in terms of the best way to get the best out of them as a client, and also for you to be kind of the best service provider for them. Number one, be clear, concise, and confident. Okay, so the commander's personality style is notorious for shit testing their vendors prior to working with them. So they might throw little comments out there just to kind of throw you off when you're doing your demo or your discovery or anything like that. They might actually purposely be a little bit difficult to answer questions when you're trying to do discovery specifically, because they're so short and they don't really go into a lot of depth. Trying to get a very deep discovery out of them can be difficult a lot of the times for a lot of sellers, as I've seen in the past before. So my biggest piece of advice, particularly when it comes to discovery, is just try and match their energy. Okay, focus on kind of like big picture bullet points. Don't go into too much detail again. Number three here, ask powerful questions. And again, also don't over-explain yourself, because once you start to over-explain yourself, you can put these people to sleep very quickly. And again, because their minds are working at such a fast pace, they'll want you to just shut the fuck up and get to the point. So next we have the influencer personality. So when we're talking about an influencer, I want you to think in terms of maybe an aerobics instructor, a news reporter, a comedian, something of this nature. So something that's a little bit more eccentric and out there. Okay. Now, again, typically people will not be just one personality style, although you can find those types of people that might be more weighted to one than the other. Most people will be a mixture of one or two, but yes, that's typically what you'll find with an influencer. Now, when it comes to their values, they are very upbeat and very high vibrations, right? So they love creativity, they love fun, connection, positive energy, all that kind of stuff. They love to entertain people and also uplift, right? So they're very extroverted and outgoing. Their communication style is fun, light, warm, and chatty. So when you're talking to these types of buying personalities, you want to make sure that your sales pitch is very story driven, because they love going on different sort of stories, and they can be very emotionally pulled into stories, right? So if you remember the top and the bottom of the quadrant, they sit at the bottom, so they're more emotional based. Now, one thing that's very important to know about the influencer is they can easily go off topic, right? So when you're doing a discovery call, and I actually might load one up to YouTube of me doing one with an influencer personality, you might ask them a very direct question in terms of like, what brings you here today? What's your biggest challenge? Something like that. They can go off on massive, massive tangents, and they can start by answering the question, but they can end in a completely different sort of point that has nothing to do with the initial question that you asked. So again, don't take any of this sort of personally. Don't think that they're doing it on purpose or anything like that, because they're not. It's literally just how they communicate. They hate silence as well, right? So a big part of sales, particularly more advanced techniques, are once you sort of do a price drop or something like that, you just go dead silent. Influencer personalities hate that silence. They don't like sitting in it. They find it very awkward. They find that they need to speak in order to fill those silences. So again, they're great to sell to in that regard, because once you price drop, you're going to get their feedback straight away. They're not going to take too much time to sit there and think about the price or anything. They'll kind of give you their exact, I guess, thoughts and opinion on what they think the price is and whether or not they want to move forward. So when we come down to motivations, we're looking at what do they kind of get motivated by the most. Okay, so things for the influencer are things like belonging, so belonging to a group, connection, social proof is a big one as well. So they might be asking you for things like client testimonials, for client reviews. These are typically the personality types that will also be the ones that will actually reach out to your old clients or to your current clients. So if you've got any clients that are happy to give you a testimonial, and you have the hunch or the feeling that you're speaking to an influencer, you can even pepper those testimonials in your presentation, right? And I do that all the time as well. And it's just a great way to get them kind of more and more excited about the fact that, yeah, you basically have the social proof that they want, and you can really deliver on what you say you can deliver on. Making them feel special, included, and also emotionally uplifted. So those are big motivations for the influencer personality type. When it comes to their convincer type, we call them an automatic convincer with who criteria. So again, the automatic convincer means that they are pretty much a one call close. The who criteria means, who do you work with at the moment in terms of social proof, right? So if you're working with any big brands or big logos within your vertical or your niche, those would be the ones that you'd want to show off to this personality type, because it gets them very excited that they're going to work with you, and you've worked with these big brands or big logos before. They also make fast, spontaneous decisions. So this just ties into the previous point that I made about them being that one call close that we want. So that's always a good thing for us salespeople that are in those faster transactional type sales cycles. When they rely heavily on social proof, the questions that they're going to ask themselves will be like, will I belong to your community, right? Because as agency owners, we also are trying to build up a little bit of a community at the same time. The more clients that we can have within a certain niche, we can then start to build communities around that and be the go-to agency in that specific niche or vertical. For them to be part of that is a huge thing for these influencer personality types. So if you can start to build out your own sort of community and sell that to them, they'll be part of this community. That's also going to be a huge selling point for them. Will they like you? And also, will they have a fun experience with you? So being able to weave within your pitch some way that they'll actually enjoy the process. Now, that's going to depend very much so on what niche you're selling to and what specific service you're selling. So I can't give too much info on that in terms of the what. But in terms of the how, yes, that's exactly how you can get them excited, by basically telling them how they're going to have fun. Now, something that's also really important to understand about the influencer personality is they are very susceptible to shiny object syndrome. Again, so please don't take any of this personally, but they can be very disloyal clients or prospects, and they can change direction very quickly. Okay, so they might churn out of nowhere for what you might believe to be no reason, but the real reason is because they're always on this roller coaster of looking for, I guess, other emotional spikes and kind of just getting that dopamine hit. They might get hit up by an ad that looks really interesting to them. You might be getting them really great results, but then, another agency hit them up with a better looking ad than what they have seen recently. They jump on a Zoom call and they get closed, and they just go around on this roller coaster of churning and burning through different agencies. I've seen it happen many times. It's just really, really important for you to know that, to not take it personally, but it's just something to be cognizant of. Their temporal focus is going to be future focused. Okay, so excited by possibilities. So when you're again selling to them, you're trying to get them to envision the positive future. You really want them to open up and tell you, like, what are they going to expect when they get XYZ goal, and how's that going to make them feel, what are they going to achieve, stuff like that. And they will go on long monologues. Again, don't let them go too long to the point where they go off topic, but being future focused and excited by possibilities is really good for you to know as a salesperson, because that would be where you would focus the majority of your sales calls. When you're trying to get them to envision the negative future or the cost of inaction, they're going to find that a little bit harder to answer, because that's not naturally how they think. So you're going to have to ask more probing and clarifying questions to get them into a little bit more of a negative headspace in that regard, and help them understand what that's going to look like if they don't make a move in terms of moving forward with your solution. Their energy, light, bubbly, excitable, and spontaneous, can be erratic and unreliable under pressure. So basically the complete opposite to the commander personality style. Okay, because commanders are very reliable. When they give you their word, they will absolutely show up to the call, and they absolutely will sign if they say they're going to sign, and this sort of stuff. It's very much so the opposite with the influencer. Okay, if you can't close them there on that first call, then you're going to have a hard time chasing them, right? And because they're notorious for ghosting. So in terms of how to work with them, match their warmth, but don't let the energy run the call. Okay, and what I mean by that is, like, don't let the energy in this, like, this personable conversation that you're having with them, don't let that be the whole premise of your call, because they can become a friend very quickly on the calls, but you don't want that to happen too much or too often or to any sort of great extent. You want to make sure that you're still keeping very professional with them, be personable, but don't go too far. Otherwise, you won't end up getting the sale out of them. Politely interrupt them and guide them back on track if they start to wander off. Now, make sure that you also keep the process structured as they derail easily. Okay, so this just ties into a previous point that I made before. If you are going to send them information, make sure that you actually book a follow-up call with them, all right? Make sure that you get some sort of commitment from them, and make sure that follow-up call is within the next 24 to 48 hours, because if it goes any longer than that, again, they are very, very notorious for ghosting, and there's a very high chance that you won't speak to them again. And this all, again, just comes back to this shiny object syndrome. By the time they speak to you, they've come off the call, they've probably been hit up by another competitor's ad, they've booked in the call with that other competitor, and then they just keep on going and going. So make sure that doesn't happen. Next is to get commitment from them on the call. Okay, so a best case scenario, again, get them to pay on the call, and that's basically the job done. If you can't, for whatever reason, try and get a deposit. If you can't do that, then we'll need to get some sort of next steps meeting and some sort of commitment to change and a follow-up. Again, 24 to 48 hours at the absolute most. And finally, make sure that you use calendar reminders, okay? SMS, email, phone call follow-ups, whatever you need to do, make sure that you utilize all of that, because they will forget if you don't use any of that at all. Okay, so next we have the nurturer. So the nurturer personality style, in terms of jobs or professions that you might see, typically tend to be like teachers or nurses. Okay, so prior to working in the mortgage and the real estate space for my SMMA, I was actually working with cosmetic injectables. So you think about cosmetic nurses, and they were primarily the nurturer personality type. And something that I noticed was when I was trying to be too fast with the sale, a lot of the time that would actually scare them off. So I'm speaking from first-hand experience. You don't want to try and first call close them too abrasively, because again, you will scare them off and then you won't hear from them again. Okay, and I'm going to get into the convincer type very shortly as to like the strategy of how you convince them to buy. But when we're looking at the values of the nurturer, so they value things like care, support, and safety, and emotional well-being. Okay, they want to look after others, and they also want to make sure that they're being looked after in return. So it's very much so a personable type relationship. A nurturer is a very warm personality type, and the type of relationship that you're trying to have with them is going to be more consultative. Okay, you don't want them to feel like you're just a salesperson that's just trying to take their money and run. You want to make them feel very, very comfortable prior to actually being able to pitch to them, or prior to even starting any sort of partnership with them. Their communication style is very soft-spoken, polite, warm, and gentle. So again, like a motherly figure. If you think about that, that's a very, very good example of what a nurturer would be, like a stereotypical mum. Slow to open up, but deeply authentic. Okay, so when you're going through the discovery questions, A lot of the times they're going to be a little bit closed off to begin with, but then over time, once they start to warm up to you, they'll start to let you know some very, very deep information. And again, it's not like selling to the influencer or to the commander where you go into pain so directly. You want to still go into pain, but you want to be a little bit more implicit about it and then work again as a partner with them to help them come to some sort of solution. Okay. So they're motivated by feeling safe, understood, and cared for, and they prefer working with someone that actually gets them. And this is exactly why I say that it takes a little bit of time, right? So during the discovery, you don't want to speed it up. You really want to make sure that you're taking the time to really understand their situation, sort of also understand them on a personal level as well. Make sure that when you're having the discovery calls, you stay on topic, but you just want to go quite deep with them and make sure that it's not just going to be surface level stuff. Otherwise, you simply won't be able to get them to open up enough. Now, when we're talking about the convincer type, again, they are a period of time convincer. So this is different to the first two personality types, again, because the nurturer is on the left-hand side of the quadrant, meaning that they are going to be past focus. Therefore, they need some time to think about it. And also they're going to need some time to be convinced. They normally need to process this from like an emotional standpoint. Typically, it's going to be around about 48 hours. Like, I know logically it doesn't make sense, but this is just how it works with this personality type. Okay. So the question I typically ask them is, okay, what do you think is going to change in the next 24 or 48 hours? Stuff like that. And the fact of the matter is, you and I both know that not much is actually going to change. And I think the prospect knows that as well. But again, when we're talking about emotion and logic will not beat emotion. That's kind of the bottom line here. And the main point I'm trying to get to is like when you try to be overly logical with them, they are an emotional personality type. And so trying to say something logical, like what's going to change in the next 24 to 48 hours, that's just not going to resonate with them. And it's not going to help them understand that nothing's going to change. Throwing that sort of comment at them and trying to beat them over the head with a mindset bat is not going to be in your best interest. You're best to understand the archetype that you're speaking with, understand that these are their values, this is their communication style, this is what they're motivated by, but more ultimately, this is how you actually sell to them, okay? It's just going to take a little bit of extra time, and you don't want to burn away these potential prospects just because you get frustrated, right? It's not good sales etiquette to do that, and also you're just burning through pipeline equity in the future as well. So make sure that you're being respectful with them. So after they've processed that information and they're on that second call with you, because again, I'm not saying that you can't sell to them on the first call. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that typically speaking, it's not going to happen. And that's not a reflection of you as a salesperson. That's a reflection of the prospect as one of the 4 buying archetypes. So on that second call, typically they would have had some time to process everything. And after they've processed it, all they need at that point is just a gentle nudge to move them in the right direction. Okay. So again, don't be too assertive or aggressive with it. Just ask them the right questions to help them understand that partnering with you will actually be the right thing to do and will be in their best interest. And when treated correctly as an actual client, they become extremely loyal long-term clients. Okay, they tend to be the longest lasting clients because they are very, very loyal. So again, completely opposite to the influencer. They're not easily swayed and thrown in multiple different directions or anything like that. Once you have the nurturer as a client, they will very likely last quite a long time as long as you continue to deliver results and as long as you're doing the right thing as an agency. Okay, so their temporal focus is going to be past focus. Okay, so again, the temporal focus is how this prospect makes decisions with regards to time in terms of what's happened in the past or looking forward to the future. With the nurturer, typically what they do is they're going to reflect on what happened in the past, why it happened, and how it led them to be in the current situation that they're in right now. Okay, so they use past pains or patterns to make sense of the present decisions that they're about to make. So that's why helping them understand that not necessarily using the past to make their present decisions might be in their best interest. Again, that's a very logical way of looking at it. So we need to make sure that we're very delicate with how we have that kind of conversation with them. Their energy, again, very warm, very calm and gentle, nurturing and reserved. And when we're talking about how to work with them, typically the best way to do this is build trust through empathy, patience, and also reflective listening. Okay, make sure you're always listening very, very intently when you're speaking to this personality style because they appreciate it immensely. Another thing which is really important, and I see a lot of salespeople get this one wrong, make sure that you slow your pace down when you're speaking to the nurturer, okay? You don't want to talk too fast. It's not at all, again, like a commander personality where you can get away with being very fast-paced and direct. It's completely different. We want to be quite slow. We want to make sure that we explain things quite detailed, and we want to make sure that we give them enough time to process and really, really understand the nuances about what you're fundamentally trying to say to them. Make sure you always set a follow-up meeting as well. Again, if you're not able to close them on that first call, which most times won't happen, they always will show up and follow through. Okay, so if they say they're going to meet you at Tuesday at 10 a.m., they will absolutely be there because they said they'll be there and they are absolutely people of their word. And the final point there is, again, not to push too early. All right, now, once again, I'm speaking from personal experience. I've done this in the past and it's not really led to any fruitful results for me, unfortunately, when I was doing this. So I learned the hard way, so make sure you learn from me. Do not push too early. Give them the time if they need it. Again, it's only going to be a couple of days. They're very, very reliable. So if they say they're going to commit, but they just need to have some time to process or whatever, take their word for it because the chances are very, very high that they will. And finally, we have the strategist. So this is my personal buying personality type. And I'll say this from my own firsthand experience, these are the hardest prospects to sell to, okay? I'm going to get into why on the next slide in terms of how they are also, just like the nurturer, a multiple time convincer, but they're not the sort of people that are just going to close in sort of 24 to 48 hours. Generally doesn't work like that. So what they typically value is accuracy, correctness, and well-designed plans. So when you're pitching to them, make sure that you're very accurate when it comes to numbers, statistics, ROI. Make sure that your pitch and your demo deck looks very professional. And these are also people that are quite analytical and logical and detail orientated. So they will ask lots and lots of questions. When you think about different careers or professions that are going to be the strategist, these typically tend to be the professional services, right? So finance related, accounting, doctors, lawyers, things of this nature. They tend to be a little bit more introverted as well because, again, they are thinkers, they're more analytical. So it's in your best interest to build logical, informed strategies based on evidence. So again, testimonials will be a big one here for the strategist as well to understand what kind of social proof you have, but for different reasons compared to the influencer. Okay, the influencer wants to know what social proof you have so that can get them excited to be part of a tribe because you've worked with these big brands or these big companies before. The strategist is more interested in who you've worked with just to show that you can actually get the correct numbers and the ROI that you're saying you can get. So communication type, typically they're a little bit more skeptical. Okay, so they're the ones that will ask, again, lots of questions. They might come off as a little bit cold or cynical. And also they're very hard to build rapport with in many cases. And again, just don't take that personally because it's not sort of a personal reflection on you. It's just how they think and how they process information. They're just very logical, right? So again, they sit at the top of the quadrant with the commander. So in terms of their communication style, just similar to the commander, is they can be very short and direct with how they communicate, but they're more detail orientated. Whereas the commander is short and direct with communication, but not detail orientated because they're big picture thinkers. Okay. They value professionalism, detail, and factual accuracy. They are mainly motivated by making the right decision. Okay. So mitigating risk by gathering all information, really, really important for them. They want to make sure that they are making the right decision and absolutely not making the wrong decision. And this is the exact reason as to why they take time to think about it before they ultimately end up investing in your solution. Ensuring that the strategy is thorough, logical, and safe. Clarity, structure, data, and proof. So these are all the things that they value and they're motivated by. And again, I'm really hoping that going through this, you're starting to understand why some of these personality styles will buy straight away and why some of them simply won't. And obviously, the think about it objection, we all know that that is a smokescreen objection for the most part, but also in many cases, you need to understand that it's also a legitimate objection because based on the personality type you're selling to, this is just how they buy. Okay, so we need to respect that. Now, convincer type for the strategist is a multiple time convincer. Typically, they need 3 to 7 follow-ups. And I'm not even joking when I say that. They're just going to need that many touch points before making a decision because this is just how they process information. They need to speak to you, go home, do some research, read through emails, look up testimonials, watch more videos, understand the service offering to a very detailed extent before they actually make that final call. Another really good thing about the strategist is, although they are slow to buy, once they do, and once they're actually in your community or in your agency or whatever the case is, they are very long-term, loyal customers. A little bit different to the nurturer, though. The reason why the strategist typically is loyal is because it's just too hard making another decision to go to another vendor. Okay, it's not because they have any sort of affinity to you as a person or to a brand or a company or anything like that. It's more of just a logical thing that if you are performing, if you're actually getting them a result, then it's just too much of a pain in the ass for them to go find another vendor, because they themselves know that they take ages to make a decision. So if you can deliver results for them, then you can hold on to them for a very long time, which is a very good thing. When you're selling to them, also understand that they are very price driven, data driven, and also highly risk adverse. So I bring this point up because when it comes to pricing, they will be the ones that typically try to haggle pricing. They're not necessarily just going to take the price at the list price that you give them. So just be prepared for that. They want to know, okay, if this is the pricing, what sort of ROI can I expect from this? And they will push and push and push for numbers and ROI, and basically kind of like not necessarily guarantees. They won't really ask too much about like what's the guarantee. They just want to have a better understanding of what the future will look like in terms of data. Okay, so what kind of metrics can I typically expect by the end of the 30, 60, 90-day marks, for instance? Although they aren't the ones that typically look for guarantees or anything like that, these are also the last ones that you want to give guarantees to, because they absolutely will remember that you gave them a guarantee and they will hold you to it as well. So it's best not to mention the guarantees around them. Similar to the nurturer, they can end up becoming massive chargebacks and refunds and stuff, and it's simply not worth it. Temporal focused, again, past focused. So they're on the left-hand side of the quadrant. They typically study their past mistakes to avoid repeating them. Okay, so when we're going through envisioning the negative future, we want to make sure that we've understood during the discovery, during the other stages of the prime framework, that we've built up enough of a case and enough pain that we understand their past. And also, if they don't move on something going into the future, they're going to relive that past. That's basically what we need to help them understand when we're doing discovery. They use history and patterns to inform the future, although that's not necessarily the best way of going about it. Okay, and again, I'm saying this as a strategist buyer myself. Sometimes I use historical patterns and things that may have gone wrong in the past to project what's going to happen in the future. And that, again, is not a logical way of thinking, because we all know this working in sales. You can't necessarily use those past experiences to dictate those decisions that you're going to make moving forward in the future. So because the strategist is very logical, you can actually then use that exact objection handler against them, and that will work quite well. Help them logically understand that past decisions shouldn't dictate the future decisions. Okay. So their energy typically is cool, calm, and logical. They're very detached and unemotional, and they are also risk conscious. So just very important to know. They are, again, the hardest type of buyer to sell to. So they're not being difficult for the sake of being difficult. Again, most sellers that I see will try to sell to the strategist the same way they do the commander or the influencer, with the one call close. If the strategist doesn't buy straight away, that seller will not follow up with this buyer ever again, because they think that they're just wasting time. They're really not. They, again, just buy in a different sort of way. They just have a different strategy when it comes to buying. So if you have the patience to sit through it and actually endure the 3 to 7 follow-ups that are required, you're going to find that, again, these are some of the best types of clients that you'll end up working with. Finally, they can be skeptical, cautious, and hard to warm up. But again, once you get them over that finish line, you're going to be all good to go.
And that's it. That's our high-level overview of the 4 buying archetypes. As I mentioned before, keep an eye on the channel. Make sure that you subscribe, because we will be going a lot deeper on all of the topics that we covered today. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share with somebody that needs to know this, and I'll catch you soon.